end of time.
O'clock.
Well, hey, everybody. What's going on? Do you think the light's too bright, or do you like it?
It looks pretty good to me, I think.
Yeah, okay.
What does everybody else think?
I mean, I'm not really sure.
They can drop it in the comment section.
Because it's like, it looks good on my end, but I don't know what it looks like.
Well, I don't have my glasses on.
Everything looks better when you...
Let me see your glasses.
Are you going to put on my lady glasses?
So I can see the good shit.
Sexy, I think.
I'm all sophisticated.
Of course, I can't see now, so I don't really...
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay.
Looks good.
Yeah, I spiraled through all the colors, and it's like, I liked some of the colors, but I didn't think you would like them. Zach says, y'all look good, very supple and flesh-like. Ew. Just like Tom Hardy's ass. Let's not go down that route again.
Y'all girls talk about Tom Hardy's ass, man.
Well, I was just kind of amazed by the angle, you know what I mean.
That old back arch. Yeah.
Zach says it's still weird seeing Jen without glasses. Yeah, and the weird thing is, like I said, I only wear them, to look at computers and to read.
Yeah.
Because I can see normally, but I can't see like close up because I'm old, so that's why. But yeah, so I think this will be kind of a fun show because I'm not going to have like any kind of big structure or anything like that, but I've been wanting to do a show just kind of like freewheeling, talking about the weekly world news like for a while. And so I'm glad that finally won in the poll by an overwhelming margin. So like I said, I kind of feel like this is going to be like not so structured and just kind of like a freewheeling show because people can think about what their favorite weekly world news fucking headlines were. And if you're not from the United States, I don't know like how much the weekly world news is known outside of the US. It's a very American thing, and I kind of feel like it's published in Florida, and I kind of feel like if Florida Man was a newspaper, then the Weekly World News would be that newspaper. Like, it's online only now. You can't get the print thing anymore. They stopped printing it in, I think, 2007.
They stopped wasting paper on it.
They stopped wasting paper on it. But, well, some people collect it. I was watching a YouTube video earlier today, like, on my lunch hour of a guy who, like, collects some of them. So he has, like, some of the old... And it's funny, because I had some of those back in the day, too. Because, yeah, it was only, like, a quarter or 50 cents, like, back in the old days, like, in the 90s. So if it had, like, a funny headline, then you would just, like, buy it and read all the crazy shit in there. But I think mostly people remember them for the crazy headlines.
Yeah, Jenny's got them printed out.
I have some that I printed out that I just thought were funny.
That one right there, I remember that as a kid.
Bat Boy, Bat Boy is he's almost like their mascot at this point. They first came up with Bat Boy in 1992. And if you don't know who Bat Boy is, he's kind of like, he's supposedly...
She's going to show you.
He was a half man, half bat, or half boy, half bat, like kid, right?
Yeah, that's bad.
And he was, allegedly... found in a cave in West Virginia. And the first story was...
in a mining town.
Yeah, the first story I think was Bat Child found in cave or something like that, like in the 90s. And then like as time went on, that character was so popular that they would keep doing recurring stories about it, where eventually like he worked with special forces, like he went into outer space, and he did like all kind of like he went to capture Osama bin Laden. This wasn't, this was actually after, this was
when did they first unleash Bat Boy?
92.
92, that's what I said, 92.
Yeah. But this article isn't from 92. This is a later one. Because like I said, he kind of became a recurring character and did all kind of crazy shit.
I can't believe that was so recent. I thought that, because I remembered it, but I thought I was remembering that from like the early 80s.
No. I mean, Weekly World News has been around since 1979.
Okay.
But Bat Boy didn't come about until 1992.
Because that shit was iconic. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, I think it was their second biggest selling issue, which is why they kept putting the character like in more scenarios. Yeah, and Oracle said there's a musical about Bat Boy. It's bonkers. Yeah, there's a musical about it, and there's also a comic strip about it where he does like even crazier shit. Because... I mean, the thing about Weekly World News, it comes out weekly, and the people that work there, I mean, it's obviously not meant to be taken seriously. And I kind of feel like their whole aesthetic is it's supposed to look as cheap jack and shitty as possible. So it's like they don't So I think it's kind of a thing where it's like, well, they don't really have a lot of time to do like a really good Photoshop that looks realistic because a lot of the stuff looks really janky. But in a way, that kind of like contributes to its charm, I guess, because
what they're doing is they were kind of homaging the National Enquirer because Enquirer.
Well, it's the same. The same publication company.
Right. But Enquirer would do that. Mm-hmm. But it would be a little bit more believable in the Enquirer, a little bit, not a whole lot. But like the Enquirer would show you a photograph of a fucking stain on a ceiling that looked like Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, Jesus appears in the fucking toilet bowl stain or whatever.
Ew.
Jesus,
gross, Jesus.
Jesus appears on a fucking piece of fucking toast. The way the toast burned, right? Like Jesus' face and shit.
I have a
shit and it might have been slightly touched up, but it was, it looked okay.
I have a thing. It's a plastic. It looks like a cookie cutter. And what you do, and it has Jesus on it. Is it Jesus or the Virgin Mary? I think it has Jesus on it, and it was specifically made to put into toast, into bread, and then you put it in there. When it toasts, it comes out. It looks like it has Jesus on it.
Yeah.
I wonder what happened to that. It's around here somewhere. But yeah, I did make some Jesus toast with it a couple of times. But that's what's funny? Speaking of Jesus, like in the toast and everything. I was on my way home from work today. I was listening to a podcast, which wasn't entirely about the weekly world news, but it was kind of like a lot about it because one of the guys that was on there, it was just two guys talking, and one of the guys used to work there, like he was the editor, and he had actually come from National Lampoon, and he started working there in 1999 and was kind of like made the boss, and he's just like, he's like, yeah, I'd worked for humor magazines, but this was like a whole different kind of vibe to it. And he was saying that it's like, so we had this huge repository of photos, like of various kinds, and we would buy photos like from people if they called up and had something that we thought sounded cool. And he's like, so he was telling this story, like this woman called and said, oh, I have a picture of like Jesus like in a cloud or something. And he's like, big fucking deal. We have like 1 million pictures of Jesus in the clouds or Jesus in a piece of pizza or whatever the fuck. And she's like, yeah, but this one's a little bit different. And he's like, well, what's different about it? She's like, well, there's another guy in the cloud with Jesus. And he's like, oh, who's the other guy? Karl Marx. He was like, send that shit right over. You know what I mean? So it was like that kind of thing. It's like when I was reading like all about Weekly World News, like there's a very famous quote which is attached to it. I don't think it's the same guy that said this, but one of the news, that it actually might have been, because I didn't catch his name, but one of his quotes about it, about the Weekly World News said, if someone calls me up and says their toaster is talking to them, I don't refer them to professional help. I say, put the toaster on the phone. So that's like pretty much what you're... But you know what's interesting? As I was kind of delving into the background of this, honestly, like a lot of the stories, some of the stories, particularly later on, because I think in 1999, I think was when they got a new owner. And he just, and he hired a bunch of comedy writers. Like I said, he got the editor guy from National Lampoon, and he recruited people from like comedy publications to kind of like punch it up and make it funnier. But prior to that, he's like, you might think that most of the stories were just like completely made up out of whole cloth. And he's like, and some of them were, like especially later. But he's like, most of them actually did have a germ of truth to them. He's like, what we would do, especially in the early days, is we would get papers from all over the world, like newspapers. And so the writers and stuff would just go through piles and piles of papers like every single day, like looking for weird ass stories like from around the world. And then they would find like a germ of something that sounded weird, and then they would embellish the shit out of it. So he's like, so most of the stories that you saw in there, as outlandish as they were, did actually have some, like a tiny, tiny kernel of truth. They usually weren't completely made up. Like, and for an example of that, he's like, now this one didn't get printed because he's like, here's the funny thing too, is that in their offices, which I think are in Boca Raton, and he's like,
that explains a lot.
Well, that's what I said. This is like the publication equivalent of Florida Man.
Yeah.
And he was kind of saying a similar sort of thing too. And he's like, because he was from LA, you know what I mean? So he's just like, he's like, yeah, it's Florida. Yeah, it was a little weird.
Florida's a fun place. We love it here.
Well, I don't love it.
I love it. Yeah, I love Florida.
It's a weird place. Florida's a weird place.
It.
And that's kind of what he was saying.
Yeah.
But, you know, it has its own thing. It has its own thing going on. So he said, he's like, so the publication for a long time, he's like, and this might surprise you too, but he's like, we had a Quonset hut with like 50 lawyers in there. Like they all had their own desk and everything. And it's like whenever anybody that wrote a story, you had to take it to all the lawyers and they had to like vet it and make sure they didn't get sued, because like the new owner was like, if you got a lawsuit, like then you got fired like immediately. So you really had to be careful that you had to like kind of skirt around stuff. And he's like, so there was this one story, and he's like, and I wanted to do it, but the lawyers wouldn't let him do it. He's like, so he knew, you know, the actress Natasha Henstridge, she was in Species and all that. That woman, the woman from Species, yeah. And he's like, so he knew her, and it's like, and she told me this story. This is what he said. He said while she was filming some movie, I don't remember what one it was. It wasn't Species, but she's like, there was a incident where she was supposed to be swimming with a dolphin, and the dolphin like dragged her under the water and like spun her around and essentially like tried to rape her, like the dolphin did. Which I said, yeah, dolphins are kind of, actually it was a porpoise, but you know, same difference. So yeah, dolphins and porpoises are very rapey animals, in case anybody didn't know. But so he was gonna run with this story, but he had like this crazy headline to like pull people in, because it was like, you know, alien gets sexually assaulted by dolphins or something like that, because she played an alien in the movie, you know what I mean? And then he was going to run with that, but the lawyers wouldn't let him do it. And they said, well, after a while, because the National Enquirer, which was their sister paper, that was the one with all the celebrity gossip and all that crazy kind of shit. So it was like, we very, very rarely printed celebrity stories. This was usually like regular Joes. And like I said, they had a recurring list. It wasn't just Bat Boy. They had like some other characters too, that like there was one who was an alien named Pelod. He was calling him Plod at first, but he's like, no, now that I think about it, he's like, that, you know, I had to write stories about this alien because that's what you did. He was like a recurring character, but he's like, he had started like before I got there. And this alien, they had kind of a big thing like in the 90s where he was like dating Hillary Clinton, and then him and Bill Clinton got in a fight, and it was like, I think I have that issue in here somewhere with like, but when it has like a picture of Bill Clinton with somebody like a photoshopped black eye, and it's like, and then they got in a fight over Hillary and all this other kind of stuff. So there was like a whole thing about Pelod. He was another recurring character, not just. And then they had this other guy that was like a super fat guy named, what was his name? Buster Simkiss or something like that. And there was a bunch of stories about him. The funniest one about him was that they were gonna lower him down into the, like, whenever the Super Bowl, I think, was in New Orleans. I don't remember what year that was. And they said they were going to lower him down like a blimp so they could put like advertising all over him because he was like super fat. So yeah, so that was another recurring character.
This guy did not exist, I guess, right?
No. Yeah. They just made him up. And the thing of it was funny too. He's like, when you see, because even he was in some of the pictures too. Because he's like, if you see a picture of like, you know, FBI agent does this, that, and the other thing, it's like usually just one of us or somebody in the office would go and like put on a suit and go out in the parking lot and like take a picture, because it was weekly, so you needed to like get the shit done like right away. Yeah. So he's like, I was in some of the pictures. He's like, you know, the secretaries were in some of the pictures.
Nobody noticed that it's the same people all over.
Probably not. I mean, I have one in here too. It was another one with Bill Clinton that said he hired a 3-breasted intern.
Yeah.
And
he'd do that.
Yeah. And the funniest thing about that is that it also has like a little thing of Hillary over there, like with a shocked face, and it said, I thought he was a leg man, which I thought was very funny. But yeah, so they said the 3-breasted woman, that was just like, she didn't have 3 breasts, obviously, but she's like, yeah, that was just some girl that worked in the office, and they were like, hey, can we take a picture of you and like
put a third
breast on you? And I guess she's like, that's just what they did. Like, they just did this shit like every day. Like, they had to go out and like mock up all these fucking.
We've got all the regulars are in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oracle's in. John, Hugo, Mr. 88.
Hey, everybody.
Zach. Yeah.
John Gora said, anyone see the Johnny
Cami.
Carson show? Yeah, everybody's here.
Yeah, everybody's here.
Where his
Murder Hornets.
Where his guest has a potato chip with Christ's image on it, and as a goof, Carson eats it.
Oh, shit.
Not the actual chip, but a stunt one, and she freaked out, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's funny.
I mean, that is pretty funny.
He palmed the other one and ate.
Yeah. My Jesus chip! Jesus, not a Pringle.
That's funny.
Oh my god, that's fucking hilarious. But yeah, it's so, I don't know. I do kind of feel like the overarching thing of the Weekly World News, like I said, I feel like most people in the United States know what it is. Its heyday was in the 90s, I feel like the 80s and 90s. and then its circulation kind of started to decline. I think at its height, the circulation was like 1.2 million or something like that, which is a lot. And after that, it kind of started to decline just like, the rest of print media did. And so in 2007, they just totally went online. And it's still there. Like, most of the articles, like, you can go to weeklyworldnews.com and they have all the shit in there. But it's behind a paywall now. I think you can read 3 articles for free, and then you gotta subscribe. And I don't know how much the subscription is, but they still have fucking hilarious headlines. So I'm sure that, like, fucking... I think I wrote some down, like, in here. Didn't I write some down that said something about, like, the Easter Bunny Union or some shit like that? Yeah. Airlines to offer outdoor seating. That was one that I liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that one. Oh, yeah. Easter Bunny Union cancels Easter deliveries. I thought that was funny, too. And then it had, like, a picture of somebody, like, in a bunny suit, like, going, whoa, you know what I mean? Which I thought was kind of hilarious. And then there was one today that they put up about, like, goat yoga or something. But yeah. And then, like, some other ones were, like, alien Bible found. They worship Oprah. Oh, this was one of my favorites, too. Second Pope under Pope hat.
There was another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just, like, just the visual of that. Also, severed leg hops to hospital. I thought that was pretty funny, too. But, yeah, so, I've said before many times, I think my very favorite Weekly World News headline was Chocoholic Mom Gives Birth to Sugar-Coated Baby. Like, yeah. I don't know why that tickled me so much, but it did. Although, severed leg hops to hospital, that's pretty good, too. And second Pope under Pope hat. But, yeah.
I wonder how the article's actually read.
What they did, usually I think most people probably didn't even read them. They were just kind of, they just like the headlines. But what they would do, and this was, again, part of their... The guy was talking about it, like, on the show today, and he was like... We were supposed to write the articles as if they were true. It's like, obviously they weren't, but you had to, and he's like, but the weird thing about it is that the paper had its own kind of like language to it and its own like syntax. And he's like, and it was kind of old fashioned in a way. Like a lot of the words they used and shit like that. Because, I was thinking about how, Mad Magazine, like, had their own little, like, recurring words, phrases they would use and shit like that. So it's that kind of thing.
Right.
And he's like, but you were supposed to write it just like a regular news story. Even though, as outlandish as it was, you were supposed to write it exactly like it was a real news story. And for a long time, too, because you know how a lot of parody... things, and I don't even know if there's what the legality is about this, but a lot of parody news with like The Onion and things like that, it'll say, even if it's in tiny fine print, that it's like, this is a parody and it's not meant to be taken seriously, like blah blah. But for a long time, the Weekly World News didn't have that. I think in 2004 they started putting a message like, this is for entertainment only or something like that. So I don't know if they got in some kind of trouble, but and like I said, I'm not entirely sure what the legality of that is. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you can get in trouble for printing shit that's not true and printing it as if it's true, but I guess it depends on what it is and if somebody's gonna, like, sue you about it. Like, you can't just, obviously you can't just, like, say random shit about people without saying, like, allegedly, and you can't, like, say it as if it's true. Like, they can sue you, but, like I said. But they got away with it for a long time. I guess because... The thing about Weekly World News is I feel like even though most of the stories were supposedly, like, based on a kernel of truth at least, I think the perception was that it was so outlandish that no one would actually believe it was real. Even though some of the stories in there were actually true. Like, there was one in there that I think took place in Florida. Actually, it was Florida or Georgia, and it was called, and it said Hogzilla. It was just like about this giant, like, crazy hog that was running amok and everything. And it's like that was true. That was,
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. And so that was true. I mean, it was exaggerated a little bit, but that wasn't bullshit.
That's even better with some of that guava juice in it. You want some?
Sure, I guess so.
Yeah.
Although I will note that some of the stories that weren't quite as out there, as far as, like, because it does stick a lot to, like, paranormal stuff, like aliens and Bigfoot and... Armageddon type stuff, like end of the world, like biblical prophecies, Nostradamus, Elvis is alive, that kind of shit. Like, it keeps to that, but some of the stuff that's in there is just like crazy news stories, like, like a dude that got struck by lightning 7 times or something like that, because they were always like looking for it's almost like news of the weird in that way. You know what I'm saying? So some of the stuff wasn't as crazy, but then as it went on, I guess they just leaned into, and then they just started coming up with fucking crazy shit. You know what I mean? High Desert 004 said, I think everyone has at least one relative who believed that shit was real. Yeah, it's like, I might be giving people too much credit. I will note that one story that I know was reported as true, at least once, was there was a story which technically isn't that crazy. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it's not like, you know, Elvis is alive and living on the moon crazy. But there was a story in there about, I think it was the LAPD, and that they had supposedly spent $1 billion on jetpacks for their entire force. And Fox and Friends reported it as though it was true, and were like all outraged about it. And it's like, that was from the Weekly World News, you dim bulbs. So yeah, but I mean, like I said, obviously it's a crazy story, but it's not as crazy as them reporting
jetpacks.
Yeah. But I mean, hey, where's my jetpack? $1 billion on jetpacks so they can like fly around.
It's not that unusual if you understand American history anyway. There's freedom of the press. A newspaper could write whatever it wanted. They still can. There's, like I said, there's some legal shit. You know, you can't do slander and things, but you can pretty much write whatever you want. And throughout the 1800s, 1700s, they did. They just made shit up out of whole cloth.
Yeah, they did not give a single fuck.
It's called yellow journalism, and it never stopped. They just make they'll say anything. You can pay them even today to write an article that favors your company or whatever. They're mercenaries. If you pay them enough, they'll write an article about you. I knew something was crazy one time. This is back in the 2000s. I looked at a newspaper, and the story was about how great a Saudi oil prince was, and that he's a businessman and he's coming to America. And I'm reading this thing and I'm going, man, this is like a paid advertisement. And I went, this is a paid advertisement. This dude paid to get this article. I never heard of that dude again.
Well, yeah, and it's it's pretty common nowadays. Like now you're kind of supposed to disclose. It's like, yeah, I'm writing an article or a review of this product or whatever, but it's like you have to disclose, or you're supposed to disclose. It's like, oh, they sent me a free one, or they paid me for the endorsement or something like that. Like even YouTube videos, you're supposed to mark if it has like an advertiser or like a paid advertisement in there. Yeah, because you know they do try to integrate it with because some of the YouTube channels I watch like that, like Jade the Libra and Brian Hollinger and stuff like that, they have sponsors, but they integrate the stuff into their show, so it's not like a commercial necessarily, but it's just them talking about the product. But yeah, they always have to like put, it has all the stuff around the outside. But that's the thing, I used to work for newspapers, so yeah, what you would do if you had a company in the town that paid you a bunch of money and like paid for a big huge advertisement, then you could, then they'd have somebody write a puff piece about them, or they would send you something like from their PR department, like to print somewhere near the ad, you know what I mean? But you had to put on it, underneath, you had to put paid advertisement, or they had to put like a little some kind of blurb thing, like underneath to say it's like, hey, they paid for this,
right?
For this,
this article,
brown nosing or whatever it was.
Exactly what it was.
So they did at least do that, but that's about all that I know. Oracle says, oh hey, it was our anniversary last week and I made your Thai red curry again, Tom. Turned out great.
Yeah. Which spice mix did you use?
I guess the red one.
The red one in the damn can. Yeah, probably.
The yellow one's my favorite, but they're all good.
The green one.
Yeah.
The purple one, the Panang curry. Oh, that's good, man. All those little Indonesian fucking curries. Mixes.
Yeah, I like that Penang curry. That's really good.
You can make that stuff. You can make that. It's just garlic and a bunch of spices turned into a paste.
Yeah, I mean, it's just easier to get.
It's just easier to get it out of a can.
But somebody mentioned Redneck Vampire Attacks Trailer Park, and matter of fact, that's one of the ones that I have here. These are great because some of the shit. Like, okay, so, for example, they do a lot of stuff about, like, presidential, like, candidates or whoever.
She said it was the red curry paste,
Yeah, okay. So this is, like, Obama appoints Martian ambassador right there. But sometimes I feel like the funnier shit is, like, look, flying cats terrorize West Virginia. Who knew? And also, I really like this one. Wife shrinks cheating husband, keeps him in a jar.
Okay, yeah.
See? So I kind of like that right there. So he's like, that to me, that should be like the whole headline, because that's like way funnier. That's way funny.
Well, I would say here's... They're like, nah, this happens all the time. Yeah.
What, somebody shrinking their fucking...
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome, though. I just really like the wife shrinking the cheating. And this one, too. Oh, here's the three-breasted intern. See, I mean, look at... So that was somebody, that girl there, that's somebody, I think, that worked at the Weekly World News offices. And they just, like, took it. That's a pretty good Photoshop, I gotta say. Like, of the three breasts. Like, for, you know, for it being, like, really quick. But like I said, I thought he was a leg man. I thought that was really funny. Oh, and also, Edgar Casey reincarnated as Psychic Fly. So there's that, too. The buzz for 2002. Oh, my God.
Three-breasted intern.
You like that?
I can barely see.
Are you gonna? Oh, you don't have your glasses on?
I have my glasses on.
I thought I didn't.
That's just some girl.
I didn't necessarily want to show you that because then you're gonna like make me get a third breast.
No,
you don't think?
No, so.
I don't know.
Two's enough.
Two's enough. You think?
Two's plenty. Yeah.
I like this. There's the one about the alien fight. Also, look at this. Inside, get a sex change free.
Yeah, inside.
Inside the newspaper, just open it and it'll get a sex change. Wow, that's amazing. I think they worded that not so good.
Yeah.
Let me see what else I got here. Bigfoot challenge. That's just like news reporter eaten alive by 80-foot dinosaur, which is clearly an iguana.
Yeah.
That's pretty good though. I like the little dude.
Yeah, they're homage in the 50s monster.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. It's like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms or something. Although that wasn't an iguana. That was actually like a Ray Harryhausen. Yeah. But yeah, I like that one here. Yeah.
Yes, it's a monitor lizard.
Brazilian jungle.
It's a monitor.
Oh, now this one.
I think.
This might be my new favorite. I don't know why this is so funny to me. Mini mermaid found in tuna sandwich.
What?
I asked for extra mayo and got this, says Iowa man. And then look at his fucking face. And he's pulling. For some reason, like right around this time period, which I don't know when this was. Like I can't see what the date was because it's too blurry. But they went on kind of like a mermaid tear. And for some reason, it wasn't just mermaids either. Like, they particularly liked, like, miniature mermaids and mermen. Which I don't really know. I guess, like, everybody just thought that was a funny idea and it hadn't been done.
Because of the comic books, man. The little sea monkeys.
I guess so.
Yeah.
When did that mermaid documentary come out? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, the one that my dad believed.
The one that your dad thought was real?
Yeah, that was a trip. I don't know.
I still remind
in the 2000s
that.
sometimes.
Also, this is funny, too, but it's like I said, just the smaller ones here. Who left beer cans on the moon? And it's apparently, I didn't see the inside of this, but like the guy that was talking on YouTube, he said that was like a whole spread where they just had like pictures of the moon and they like, you know, obviously Photoshop beer cans on there. But I think what was funny to that is like I liked the accusatory tone of it. Like, it's not there's beer cans on the moon. It's who left beer cans. Like, who fucking did this? Like, that's very funny to me. So it's like whoever is, like, writing these. I feel like this would be a really fun job. I mean, the guy that was talking, it's like he didn't really like it because he's like, look, I came from National Lampoon. He was more like a big city guy. And he's like, National Lampoon was more, he's like, it was kind of more like highbrow humor. Where it's like, this is kind of like lowest common denominator. He's like, it's kind of like wrestling.
Yeah.
He's like, is basically what it is. He's like, so it was fun for a while, and he's like, actually the pay was incredible, and they even like gave him a condo and like all this other kind of shit. But he had a driver and like a car and everything, and he's like, so that was pretty sweet. But he's like, you know, I didn't really love it. I didn't really love having to do that. And he's like, and I wasn't used to working for a weekly, you know, because you really had to like do everything really quickly, obviously, because National Lampoon was a monthly publication. And, you know, working for a weekly, or actually I worked at a weekly newspaper and a daily newspaper. And so you just have to like, you don't have time to do anything. You have to get everything out like super, super fast, like all the time. And it's kind of like that. So he's like, that's why whenever we would make up this story and like you go in with the 50 lawyers in the Quonset hut and then they would tell you that the story was okay and then you had to go and shoot some photos. He's like, now we did have a huge, you know, what they would call a morgue, like in newspaper parlance, of that's usually where they keep like all the old newspapers. But he said we had this huge photo library. So it's like, so a lot of times if you were doing a story about Bigfoot or, you know, about aliens doing whatever, and it's like, and you needed a picture of something like a random FBI agent or something like that. It's like we had a fuck ton of pictures like that, so it's like you had to just go and like find it because I guess everything was filed. But he's like, sometimes we didn't have any of that and you would have to take one. And he said too that he worked there in 2001, like after 9/11, and he's like, and if you remember after that there was like that anthrax scare, and he's like, some of the anthrax was sent to the National Enquirer, and like I think that guy died, like that worked there. And he's like, so the National Enquirer and Weekly World News were like sister publications. He's like, so all of our photos were like in this building and there was like anthrax in there. And he's like, and so we couldn't go in there like to get any of the photos because they just had it all taped off. And he's like, and so for months and months, like nobody would come and like clean out the anthrax because you needed like the team to come. And he's like, so we kept like the guy that owned Weekly World News at the time, he's like, he kept petitioning like Jeb Bush, who was the governor or whatever then. And he's like, and he wouldn't come and like, he wouldn't allow anybody to like come clean it up for like a really long time. So it's like they couldn't go in and get any of their photos because it was like fucking anthrax. And he's like, so it became kind of a running joke after a while where it's like, hey, what's, you know, how bad could anthrax be? Go in there and get some of the photos, you know what I mean? Because like they couldn't go in there because it was all like fucking taped off. But it's like, yeah, it was like he had all kind of like fucking crazy stories about this place, but it was just really funny to listen to. It's on YouTube somewhere. I can't remember what it's called. But this one too, see this, like I said, what he was saying about this being like super lowbrow and like wrestling, I mean, our toilet is haunted by a plumber's ghost. Family flipping its lid over potty poltergeist. See, so that's kind of like it's kind of, you know, it's very juvenile. But like I said, I think that's what endeared it to people. I mean, because some of the fucking, see, I like this one too. Surgeons cut my head off and sewed it back on. You know, I hate when that happens. So I don't know what the story behind that is. But it's like, I don't know if there was like some fucking ring of truth to that, but... And this one, Fat Cat owns 23 old ladies.
Damn.
That was another, I think this was another recurring character, this big, huge fat cat. Now, the fat cat was real. Like, it was this big, huge cat. I think it weighed 80 pounds or something, and which is a very fat cat. But people responded so well to this cat that they kept putting the cat in, like, new adventures.
The cat's in new adventures.
Yeah, so they would do, like, yeah, so, like, if somebody responded really well to, like, a character, like the fat guy, like, you know, being lowered into the stadium or Bat Boy or whatever, then they would just keep making up stories about, because, I mean, Bat Boy, he went on a whole fucking thing, man. Like I said, he joined Special Forces, like, he would keep getting captured by scientists, and then he would escape. And, like,
Doctor's autopsy a ghost.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
Oh, and this one, this is great, too, and it's, like I said, it's just down at the bottom. I didn't even notice it at first. Parent vanishes during peekaboo game. Which I was like, that's fucking awesome. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't even have to read the stories. You don't have to read the stories because that shit is fucking hilarious. But, yeah. Duck Hunters Shoot Angel. There's that one.
Wow.
Yeah. Look at that. That is very bad.
What is that?
I could do, like, it's supposed to be an angel. But look, it looks like...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's somebody in a damn hospital fucking gown.
Yeah,
with
like
some wings, fucking.
Like kind of. It doesn't even look like. Oh, they're floating in the lake.
Floating,
okay. I couldn't figure that out.
It's in the lake.
Yeah.
Okay.
See.
Yeah,
like she's different. I got you.
Face down in the lake.
Because I'm sitting there going, what the fuck is the deal with that? Why does she look like she's just like stiff out like that? I guess she's just like laying in the fucking lake. Oracle says Jan in the pan. That's what I thought too. That was You said, have you seen that MST episode? It wasn't The Head That Couldn't Die. That was a different movie. It was, the fuck was the name of that movie? I just totally fucking spaced out on it. It's about this guy, and he's like a scientist, and he's, his fiance is in the car.
Damn.
And they get in a wreck, and she gets beheaded, and he keeps the head alive.
Oh, yeah.
With this special juice.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then he goes around, like, looking for a new body. So it's kind of like a proto-man with two brains, except it's a whole head. And she's, like, not happy about it. I mean, she just does not. And so when they did it on MST, they called her Jan in the Pan. And actually, Mary Jo Pehl, like, you know, who plays Mrs. Forrester, she was actually a recurring character. Like, she would be Jan in the Pan. So she would be just like this head in a fucking... like metal baking dish or something like that, like with all these fucking. But yeah, it was like super funny. That was actually Mike's first episode, and it's still one of my favorite ones. That's still like really fucking funny to me. Aliens abduct cheerleaders. So look, she's like with the bra. That's like fucking funny. Santa arrested while checking who's naughty. I don't know how that happened. But yeah, here's the redneck vampire attacks trailer park one. Like with his fucking teeth coming out like that. Doctor cures all phobias. And then E.T. school yearbook discovery. So there's like an alien that they clearly did somebody's nose and put like some shit on him. And then there's like Bat Boy and stuff like that. But yeah, so those are like just some of the good ones that I saw. I think that the mini mermaid and the fucking tuna sandwich was like the funniest fucking thing.
Yeah, my dad actually. What year was that?
That's what I can't remember.
It was around
the brain that wouldn't die. Thank you.
It was like 2017, maybe 2016. Me and Jen were getting ready for a show, and I was talking to my dad on the phone, and he's like, "Yeah, there's all kinds of weird stuff." He goes like, "Some of that stuff I didn't think it was real, and then it turned out it was real, like mermaids." And I was like, "What?"
Wait,
yeah,
what? Mermaids are real?
Mermaids.
Since when?
Well, I saw this program, and it gives a whole history of them. Thousands of years, people were seeing them. And it's on cave paintings, and up in the... They got drawings inside the pyramid. And it turns out they're real. They got mermaids and mermen down there. I didn't think that shit was real, and I was like, no. And he goes, yeah, it was on History Channel.
I saw it on a TV.
Yeah, it was on History Channel. They had all them scientists. They're down there. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on, what the fuck is this? And I was trying to get the name of this. All right. And I said, hold on, I'm gonna check that. I'm gonna look into this, Dad. I'm gonna look into this. Yeah, you look at it, because he doesn't have internet.
Yeah.
He's still living like it's fucking 1984. I said, I'll check into it. So I told Jen about it. And Jen looked into it on the internet and came back like 5 minutes later. Oh yeah, that was something for the Discovery Channel.
It was a mockumentary.
It was a mockumentary. It looked like it was a real documentary, but it was for Monster Week or something.
Yeah.
And
Monster Week.
Yeah, and then like a History Channel or Discovery or something bought it, and they ran it. And boomers, the boomer generation, if it's on TV, it's real. That's the thinking. If you have some authority figures, some doctors or something, they tell you something. Oh, that's true. And it was he didn't know what a mockumentary was.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, it's not that. It was a real documentary. And I says, no, it's called a mockumentary, Dad. It's supposed to be like a real documentary.
Yeah.
And he goes, the doctors that they had on there were all actors. And it took me a while to convince him, because once a person's duped, it's hard to undupe them. And he goes, I was kind of curious about why all them female doctors were fine as hell like that. You don't see. That's what kicked
that
me
was
over the edge.
That was the one thing that made him suspicious. Yeah. Is that the female doctors were too hot.
They were too hot. Yeah, they were too hot.
That's typical.
Says, you don't see that. You don't see that. He's right though. I went and looked to see.
He believed mermaids.
He believed mermaids,
but super hot female scientists. That's a bridge too far.
Bridge too far. And I went.
That's hilarious.
I went and looked at the doc. We watched the documentaries. Me and you. When we watched it. And when the female scientist came on, I was like, oh, that's what my dad's talking about. Yeah. Because she looked like a damn fashion model or a porn star or something.
It was a good mockumentary, but you could tell that they were actors.
Yeah.
I mean,
they were too young. A lot of the people were
and the
CGI
young. Wasn't great, I thought.
No.
I mean, it was okay for something that was probably didn't have that high of a budget. But, I mean, coming from someone who, people that are into horror movies and stuff like that, I mean, we've seen tons and tons of mockumentaries. Yeah. So it's just kind of like, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. But, shit, man, Troll Hunter you should show him Troll Hunter, and maybe he'll think giant trolls are real also.
You see... he got me on one. He had this. This was before I joined the army, and he goes, "Here, I want you to read this, man. This is some serious shit here.
This is some serious shit.
Yeah, this is a good book. This is what's it about? It's about these Vikings, and they go fight these Neanderthals." I was like, "What?"
You were like, "Wait, what?"
And I was like, "What?"
Those things weren't around at the same time.
Yeah. So and it was a book. It was called Eaters of the Dead. Yeah. And it's a mockumentary on a book. It does sound authentic. They're telling this story, and a guy who's like a historian, or I don't remember, he's an anthropologist. He's reading. He says he has this book, and he's going to print some of it, and it was a book that was found in Iraq, written in Arabic by some dude named Ibn Fadlan was his name, and that he'd spent time with the Vikings. He was up there trying to spread Islam or something with them. It didn't work, and while they were there, they got attacked by some savages. And turns out over time, they cut an arm off. He'd never seen an arm like that, because he was an educated Arab guy. This was like the year, I don't know, 1200 or something. And they have this big war with these cannibals. And he eventually sees them, and he describes them, and the way he describes them is Neanderthal. They were living in a cave. And they went down there to go kill them. And then it says this is where the book ends, and then there's a big thing like, we think what they're talking about is this and that. But it was a mockumentary. They made a movie about it called, what is it, 13th Warrior?
Yeah.
Yeah, the 13th Warrior is a retelling of a book called Eaters of the Dead.
That's what I mean. If you,
and it was like historical fiction, that's what you call it.
Mockumentaries, or what we would call mockumentaries, or things like ARGs, things like that. Like, the way that it's formatted is different, but it's like, it's not new. That's not a new phenomenon. Like, people have been doing, making art that they wanted to, like, seem like it was real for, like, a really long time. I feel like for a long time it was usually, like, novels. So you have, like, even Dracula is written like that. I don't think anybody thought, like, Dracula was true, but he wrote it as though it was, like, news stories and letters and journal entries and things like that. And so, like I said, it's not... So, in a way, that's kind of like an ARG would be today, where you're making videos, it's like, this is a real thing that happened, or this is a real thing that I found, or whatever, where you're trying to make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah, well, my dad read that book, and he thought it was real. He gave it to me, and I read it, and I thought it was real.
Yeah.
It wasn't until a lot later, when that movie came out, I heard about that movie, and I said, boy, it sounds like that book that I read. It turned out it was that book, and that book was a fiction.
Yeah.
I thought it was real, but it was a fiction.
Well, do you remember when we did a show a long time ago? Because you told me to look into this thing that you had read about, the
Bell Witch.
No, it wasn't Bell Witch. It was Fortean archaeology,
archaeology.
People finding live frogs that were like thousands of years old, like encased in rocks, and you said something about like
they found
pterodactyls,
pterodactyl.
like in a cave, like in a stalactite or something like that. And so I was looking into it, and it turned out that was also a fictional story that had been written as though it was real.
Okay.
And they wrote it like a newspaper story, and it got published in a newspaper. So some people did believe that it was real, but then they turned out later that it wasn't.
It's a long history of bullshitting people.
It's fun.
It's fun, yeah. Well, that's what the Bell Witch story, people... I read about that, and that seemed like something that really happened. And the phenomena sounded like Poltergeist, with a bunch of other stuff in there that I had never seen before with the Poltergeist case. But... much later, with the advent of the internet, you're able to check and see where these stories came from, and the Bell Witch story was a fiction, but it was written to be real historical sounding. I think it was written in the 1800s.
Yeah,
which they did that a lot in the 1800s, and some people really believe that it happened, but it's been debunked because the dates in which the people investigating it are given. And a date is given for the time when President Andrew Jackson shows up to see
because that's one of the most famous.
That's one of the famous things. And that Andrew Jackson saw it and believed it. They give the date for that. Well, on that date, he was in fucking Congress.
Right.
So, no.
So they know that
he was far away from that place.
Yeah, and I think I wrote about it in my book, and we did a show about it, too. But And, you know, my grandparents were from Tennessee, like, were from that area. So I grew up always hearing, like, the Bell Witch stories, and they had books about the Bell Witch and everything like that. So when I was a kid, like, I loved witches and anything scary. So I always read about that, too. I don't know. I guess I probably thought it was real, like, when I was a kid, but I guess I didn't really think too much about it. But then, like, later on, as I was kind of, like, because I was figuring, oh, it's probably just, like, a story, or maybe it's just, like, exaggerated or some shit that really happened. But I don't even know if any of it happened. I think a lot of it just kind of got made up. And I think that happens, like, the longer ago it was, the harder it is to kind of suss out. Because, like you said, if you're just, like, checking newspapers or something like that, they printed shit that was just, like, fiction all the time. And they didn't really have any distinction between... They could just print a story that someone just, like, literally pulled out their ass and printed as though it was true.
It was the only local medium that they had.
Right, and you couldn't check, like, you couldn't, like, cross-check it.
Well, it also was a general-purpose medium. You might live in a small town, and the only social media was that newspaper.
Right.
So it had to be news, entertainment, storytelling. You know, it had to be everything all in one. So some of the stories were... And they were just trying to sell papers. It didn't...
Yeah, they're just trying to make money. They didn't really give a shit about like, imparting...
Right.
Wisdom or truth or anything.
Right. So it was the tablet or the cell phone of the day. I mean, that was even before movies, before radio, you know. So it had to serve a lot of different purposes. And entertaining you and giving you some science fiction or some horror, they would do that.
Yeah, because everybody loves that shit.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was, like, researching the Weekly World News, they were saying, you know, obviously the recurring characters like Batboy and stuff like that. No, they don't really know exactly why Batboy just took off so much. I guess just because that collage, like the Photoshop that they did of it was so great and, like, so iconic. Because that's really eye-catching, like that Batboy thing. They have it on T-shirts now and everything. So, but normally they said the things that make the most impression, usually, like, end of the world type stuff. Like, people love, like, biblical prophecies, like the world's gonna end next year, because you know how people love that kind of crap. And so like, people really love that. They're like, for some reason, for a long time, like, the Elvis is alive, so, like, Elvis was having different adventures and that kind of stuff. And then they kind of, like, flipped the script a little bit later on, where they said now like the actual Elvis is actually dead, like, because they've been saying he was alive all this time. So it was very Bubba Hotep. But yeah, like, he had faked his death all that time ago, and now he really was dead. So they did do that. Like, Bigfoot stories, Loch Ness Monster, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it does seem like end-of-the-world scenarios and, like, biblical kind of stuff. And here's something, and I actually remember this, too, and, like, the guy mentioned this on YouTube. But not too long after 9/11, I remember seeing, and I can't believe they got away with this, but they had, like, a photo on the front of the Twin Towers, and... It had, like, somebody had photoshopped, like a Satan-y looking face, like, into the clouds, like, into the rubble, you know what I mean? And I remember that picture, too, and I was like, holy shit, that's a little tasteless. But, yeah, they totally did it, and they totally got away with it, too. And that wasn't that long after. It was only, like, a week or two after it happened. And, also, they got in trouble for printing photos of dead Ted Bundy, like, after he was executed.
Okay, yeah.
And, they tried to figure out, because they got in real hot water over that. Like, I don't remember seeing those photos. I remember seeing the cover. They didn't put them on the cover, but they were just, like, you know, Ted Bundy, like, autopsy photos inside, or whatever it was. And then, like, on the front page, like, on the inside, they had, like, actual legit pictures of his dead-ass body. And, I think they traced it back to, like, somebody that worked at the morgue, I guess, that had, like, taken pictures of him and, like, sold it. Because, like I said, they'll buy pictures if they're good enough. If you just have pictures of, like, Jesus on toast or something, they don't want that shit. Because, like I said, they have a bunch of those already. But if you have something, like, really crazy or really, like... I mean, they seem to, like, not care if it's real or not. Like I said, they don't... You know, and the way the guy was talking... The guy was actually kind of funny, and he was just, like... Just the way he was talking was funny. And he's just like, you know, whatever it was, it's like we didn't like fact check anything, you know, obviously, because it's like we just wanted a good story, we just wanted a good picture, we just, you know, so it's like we didn't care if shit was real or not, we just fucking hey, you have a picture of like this fucking thing, okay, like a severed head talking or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, send it to us. I don't know how much they paid like for them, but yeah,
there's a long tradition of this. That's probably the way most newspapers were, especially during the 1800s. They're like this. Because there were some cities where it was more than one major newspaper. Some was like 5 of them, and the major headlines of all the newspapers were slandering the other newspaper.
Yeah, because there was a lot more competition.
War between newspapers. Yeah, were the main.
I read a book about that like a few years ago, and it was great. It was a great book. Yeah. But it was about that. It was about, like, big cities like Chicago and New York and stuff like that. They had, like, 5, 6 competing newspapers. And newspapers came out, like, twice a day back then, too. Sometimes more than that. So, especially if there was, like, a real lurid crime or something. Because people are people. And it's like, if you have, like, some kind of ghastly murder or shit like that, everybody, as much as you might want to moralize about it and, like, shit like that, people love to read about that stuff, okay? That's just the way people are. And so... you'd have to like compete, like the newspapers would compete. It's like, oh, can we get pictures of the cut up bodies? And they would have like more and more ghastly headlines. They would just make shit up if they didn't know anything. They would, like you said, like impugn the other newspaper, like maybe like all kind of crazy shit, because there wasn't any regulation. There wasn't really any.
There still kind of isn't.
I mean, people piss and moan about it nowadays, but I mean, I think it was,
for the most part,
I think it was kind of worse back then.
Yeah, it was much
because
worse.
There was really no oversight.
Well, I think a lot of it is just there wasn't any honor. That's what.
That honor.
Too. That was the main thing. They knew what the laws were, and they would just beat the fuck out of those laws.
Yeah.
The only thing was fucking libel and slander. There was the only thing they had. Anything. The yellow journalism era. It wasn't news. That's not why people were buying it. It was social media. It'd be like Facebook or Instagram or. Fucking and Pornhub all happening at the same time. It's like with your sci-fi channel and your fucking and fucking Shudder, fucking horror going on at the same time, all in pages. It was just written. There was no visual entertainment then, except maybe like opera, some stage plays, but that wasn't portable and on demand. You could buy that paper, roll it up, and fucking carry it around and read it while you were riding in the fucking trolley cars or. In a carriage, fucking horse and buggy days.
I used to like back in the old days, like before newspapers had photography, like because I, would look at like a lot of old papers, from like old crimes, like from the end of the 19th century and early 20th century, and a lot of newspapers didn't use photos, so it's like they would have an artist that would go in there and like draw these really elaborate. Like fucking reconstructions of the crime scenes and stuff like that, and I just thought that was so cool. Like, and a lot of them like super lurid. As lurid as you could get away with for the day. You know what I mean? You can't like show too much.
People were tough back then. They were tough back then. They had a high tolerance for violence and crime, and
they saw a lot
of it, and then like
in their day-to-day lives in a way that we don't really. Most people don't really have anymore, at least in this part of the world.
It was the Victorian era, but they weren't genteel or fucking fragile. And prostitution was fucking everywhere. And crime and evidently degeneracy was pretty common.
Yeah.
Especially in big cities. Murder was pretty common. People got away with it a lot in real big cities. It's just, there's a misconception, I guess, because the way people dressed, you would think that they were real.
They looked very buttoned up.
Yeah, very buttoned up. You'd think that they would be real, fucking morally righteous, but no, there were a lot of criminals, scumbags. You had dudes like H.H. Holmes, he was unusual even for his time, but he was basically Phantom of the Opera, serial killer. They had, nowadays you got fucking porn stars and shit. Well, they had hookers back then. Some of them famous, some of them fucking elevated mentally, who were real smart women that are well connected with real powerful guys and making a lot of money and artistic, Other ones are just like trash, street trash, they had everything. It was, humanity doesn't change much.
Not really.
About the same, no matter what era. And it's kind of cyclical. But as soon as civilization, and then like ancient Rome, even though that was 2,000 years ago, kind of compares pretty favorably technologically with the 1800s, really, because Rome had a lot of technology. Rome was doing certain things with metallurgy that we couldn't do until the 1920s. Especially making things like valves, metal valves that could fucking seal real well. And there was some casting technologies that they had that we still kind of don't understand how they did it. It looked like die forming and fucking injection molding of fucking hot bronze and brass. They were ahead, further ahead than you think that they were, and socially they were kind of like today. An ancient Roman would be. You could bring him to here into the United States this year, right now. You could bring him here in a time machine, and he'd be comfortable. He'd know. He'd understand everything.
I always kind of wonder if you theoretically had a time machine and could go back and get people from different eras. I'm always like, who would, catch up the fastest?
Ancient Roman.
Yeah, I'm just probably quicker than someone from like the Middle Ages. Yeah, I would imagine.
Middle Ages, they couldn't handle it, but a Roman could handle it.
And I guess it would depend on the person too, like maybe what social strata they were from,
what
part of the world they were from.
A Roman educated middle class and above could easily. Somebody that didn't believe in superstition but was literate, understood the basics of science, because the Romans understood science.
I kind of feel like if you went to any era and found people like that, then they would be much quicker to adapt than somebody that was just like mired in superstition. And
someone from the Greek age, like Archimedes, you could bring him here, he'd have no problem.
Yeah, I always kind of thought that too, like somebody like Archimedes, or even like not even going back that far, somebody like Charles Darwin or somebody like that. Yeah. It's just like they probably, it would be like a learning curve for sure. Yeah. Because that's the thing, is that what I was going to say was that, from ancient Rome to the Victorian era, up until the Industrial Revolution, people's day-to-day lives didn't really change all that much. But then after the Industrial Revolution, everything changed. Yeah. And so, especially, in the past, 50 years, even just in the past 20 years, shit has changed so much and so quickly that it's like...
Industrial Revolution changed everything, but this new information age, that's changing things fucking faster than I could have ever imagined. I couldn't have imagined internet back in... early 90s.
Yeah.
Was kind of imagining it. 80s, no. No way.
Interestingly, some sci-fi writers did imagine something like it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I could have imagined it, but I couldn't have imagined the implications and the changes that it brought
That it
about.
would just, touch every aspect
touch everything
of
just
your life.
Totally upend the economy as we knew it, But then there's brilliant guys. Isaac Newton. You could bring him here, he'd probably understand everything, including most of the physics. But he wouldn't accept anything. He would not approve of anything in the modern era. He was very religious. He'd end up with some damn puritanical cult somewhere.
Probably.
He wouldn't like anybody or anything. He didn't like people of his era.
True. Yeah, some people are just kind of curmudgeonly.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Isaac Newton was a fascinating dude, though. I think
he was autistic.
Yeah, probably nowadays you probably would call him that. Well, and honestly, a lot of the most brilliant scientists probably were on the spectrum somewhere. Well, like I said, those two things generally go together. Not always, but it does tend to go together. But yeah. Zach said, imagine being Henry VIII to modern day. You'd make a good show topic too. Yeah, I think he's on my list somewhere. I would like to do a show about him as well. Mr. 88 said Ben Franklin would acclimate quickly. Oh yeah, big time. I think Ben Franklin would just be it probably wouldn't take him long at all. He'd be like, oh, all right, I'm down. Imagine what he would come up with modern exposure. Yeah, I do kind of feel like some dudes like that, like I said, anybody that's why I think scientists, people like that, they wouldn't really have that much of a problem. Yeah, it would probably be a culture shock and everything like that because things are a lot different. But I think they would be much quicker to adapt because they're used to... I don't know. They seem like they're more open-minded, or they're used to the way shit is. So it's kind of I don't think they'd have that much of a problem. Let me see. I saw something up here. Ben said, I loved Weekly World News' artists' impression pictures. Yeah, it's just, they had so much funny shit, and I kind of feel like people get wrapped up in their headlines, which, don't get me wrong, are hilarious and are probably, the best part of it. but they had like a bunch of other, they started doing like comic strips like later on, and I think one of the most famous things that they had was, I don't remember much about this because they had like horoscopes, then they said that was a big thing, and advice columns that were like kind of crazy and shit like that. But they also had this guy, he wasn't an advice column, but he was like an opinion guy, and his name was Ed Anger, and he was kind of like a parody of like a super like right-wing crazy like Rush Limbaugh or something. And it's like, so he was always mad about something like in his thing like every week, and so he hated everything. He hated yoga, and he hated women, and he hated immigrants, and he hated rainforests. That was another one. Like, I think they wrote, like, a bunch of people wrote as him, you know what I mean, because like over the years, and I think they even like wrote a book like of all his columns, and it was called something like destroy the rainforests and do something else. I don't know, it was like some like funny kind of thing, but he was like another kind of popular. And I think at one point, too, they even started crossbreeding, because I think that, was it Bat Boy that had Ed Anger arrested at one point? That might have been in the comic strip. Because, like I said, it got to a point where Weekly World News, they had so many, like, quote-unquote recurring characters that they started, like, mixing it up, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they would even have, like, columnists that weren't real people, obviously. It was just, like, a team of writers, like, writing that. But it's like, then they would have like their fictional characters like interacting with this fucking, like doing shit with it, and it was just like fucking crazy. And I think there was one point too where Bat Boy I thought Bat Boy had an affair with either Pilad the alien, or maybe it was Bigfoot. I can't remember now. But they had some kind of like thing going on too. So they had like some kind of sexual thing. But yeah. So but yeah, so as I mentioned, I did mention before that that some of the stories that were in the Weekly World News, like the jetpack story, like actually were reported as real. But some of the stuff in there was real. Like I said, there was a story about Hogzilla that was real, or that was like mostly based on a real thing. And then there was, you know, they talked a lot about, they had a bunch of stories about, you know, that guy, that Father Amorth or whatever. He's the guy at the Pope's Exorcist, right? I know they made a documentary about him, but they did like a lot of stories about that. So it's like, it wasn't like every single story was just like this crazy Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster are in love and they're living on the moon.
It was a mix.
It was kind of a mix of weird but true, but everything, they said everything was exaggerated though. They're like it was all about the headlines. Yeah, obviously you wanted like the, you know, the cover to be like eye-catching and be like, oh man, I need to pick that up and find out what that's all about. But it's like most of the stories, like I said, their whole job, they would come in every day, the whole team. He's like, it was a big company. He had like a lot of employees. And they would come in and just go through these piles and piles and piles of newspapers, like looking for weird stories that they could spin into something, you know. But he's like, some of the stuff they didn't change all that much. Like if there was like a bizarre story about, you know, people, like I said, getting struck by lightning or like falling off a cliff and surviving or something like that. Like they said they really liked stories about people that went through these things and like survived. And it's like, so there was a lot of that kind of stuff. And, you know, huge fat cats. And they really liked, so there was that were like realistic. They said another thing they were really into was like hybrid, like animal-human hybrid stories. They're like, those seem to be really popular as well. So they did a lot of those. Like I said, because Bat Boy was the most famous one, but they had, you know, man, goat, they had all different kind of ones because people seem to like those as well. But so like I said, I think I mentioned this on Monday, but I didn't realize that Weekly World News and National Enquirer were the same, that was the same production company, right? Now, National Enquirer, they went to color. They transferred to color printing in 1979. But they still had the old black and white press that they used to print it on, and they didn't want to waste it. So they said, well, we'll just start a whole new publication that's entirely in black and white. And the thing stayed in black and white the whole entire time. Like the inside, there was no color, so they just stayed in black and white until 2007, until they didn't print it anymore. And like I said, that kind of became like part of their aesthetic, that it was just like looked as fucking cheap and shitty as possible. And like I said, they didn't even try. Now, I will admit that some of the more recent ones that I saw, the Photoshop was a little bit better, but not much. Not much. It still looks pretty janky. Like I said, But
it's supposed to look good.
That's what I mean. I kind of feel like, yeah, they were rushed because it came out every week, and they said, yeah, it was like a big hurry to get everything done. But I think that kind of fed into the whole aesthetic because I used to buy it on occasion if I thought the headline was funny enough. So, like I said, I had one. I don't think I have it anymore. But that said Hitler was a woman on the front. And they also had Abe Lincoln was a woman. George Washington was a woman. So that was like another popular thing where it's like, X thing was a woman or was gay or whatever. And then they had a thing too. Oh, another one, I don't think I wrote it down. But there was one story that was kind of popular that that on the Titanic, they called them gay skeletons. On the Titanic, because there was apparently 2 sailors on the Titanic and they were like in a loving embrace like when they died or something like that. But I love that they titled it like gay skeletons, which I thought was like super funny. But yeah, that was another thing. So the one that I had that said Hitler was a woman, it was clearly just the top half of a photo of actual Hitler and then just like the bottom half of a stock photo of somebody in like a pencil skirt and pumps, and then they just kind of like stuck it together. And then like put it on the fucking cover, and I was like, I mean, just the shittiness of it was so brazen that you can't like not love it because they were just so committed to that.
Committed to the shit.
To the shit. That's what I mean. And it's like, and I just really like. I don't know. I like that the guy made the wrestling analogy. And he's like, and I feel like it's probably like a lot of the same audience too. Like people that really like wrestling would like this too. He's like, and I'm not saying that they believe that the shit's true, but he's like, it's kind of like wrestling where it's like you don't necessarily believe that it's true, but it's still kind of entertaining and you're sort of watching it anyway. You know what I mean? So he's like, I don't know if the people buying the shit, obviously when they were at their peak, it was like 1 million people buying it. And he's like, I don't think all of those people believed any of these stories were true. A lot of people were just buying it ironically like I was.
It'd be like buying Mad Magazine.
Right. Because it was cheap. Yeah. Like I said, I think that was only a quarter or 50 cents or something like that. So it's like, if you thought it was funny, I'm like, shit, man, it's only 50 cents. Yeah. You might as well pick it up and like read it. And it's like kind of a laugh. You know what I mean? So there's that. So yeah. So like I said, it started in 1979 just as kind of, they didn't even intend anything really. They were just kind of like, well, National Enquirer was their kind of like celebrity gossip type of thing. I think they had some. National Enquirer, didn't they used to have kind of, I don't want to say paranormal stories, but
they did.
They have like Bigfoot and shit like that. I kind of feel like National Enquirer, after a while, they kind of went just more in a celebrity direction.
Celebrities, yeah.
But so Weekly World News just went in a more like I said, they hardly print anything about celebrities.
When I was a little kid in the 70s, going to visit my grandmother in Mississippi, she would buy fucking Enquirer, all right? And I remember I used to like skim through it when I was a little kid just to look at the pictures, all right? But I remembered what the headlines were, and it was basically it was gossip about who was sleeping with who, and it was always like people you saw on television, like the television game show hosts,
Yeah.
What Johnny Carson was doing. Was he sleeping with this woman? Is he sleeping with that woman? And then there'd be some Bigfoot stuff or something about piranha in the United States, killer bees. UFO story every now and then, but that the cops saw the UFO. So, you had paranormal in the Enquirer. Yeah. And then Elvis sighted.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
There was a lot of that in Weekly World News, too.
Right, yeah. Is Elvis still alive? That kind of shit. So, no, the Enquirer had all this in it. Just wasn't as brazen. Wasn't as crazy.
Right.
It was... But, person possessed, and, then there's fucking Jesus on a toast, that type of shit. They had that. But that was kind of like...
like on a corn chip.
That wasn't the main thing for Enquirer. That was like a funny sideshow shit that they would put in there to keep the old ladies entertained, And then I remember that there was like ads and offers. Like, cut this out, send us $20, we'll give you this recipe books or, seeds that grow a special plant and bullshit like that. Bullshit that old ladies would probably get. Collector's plates, ads for collector's plates. Franklin Mint shit. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
My grandmother had all these fucking Franklin Mint plates. She thought these things were fucking priceless. She died, those fuckers all got thrown out in the garbage.
Well, that's what they told you on the TV.
Because they told you on fucking television that those things were worth something. They weren't worth anything.
Well, no, it's like they made a whole bunch of those, and they sold them on. They sold them on infomercials.
Yep.
Anything they sell on infomercials is not going to be worth anything.
And anybody who wanted those things and was collecting those things bought them from that source. They didn't buy them secondhand or used. You know what I mean? And then all the buyers are dead. Things are only collectible when you have buyers.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise just junk.
It's just junk. And,
I remember the Gone with the Wind collector's plates.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the
Scarlett O'Hara and shit. Yeah. I remember that too.
Now, my friend had the Wizard of Oz ones, but she just liked them because they were Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz stuff.
Right.
Now,
and they were nice. They were pretty.
For all I know, some of them are worth something now. But back in the 90s, they weren't worth anything.
That's what I mean. It's like nothing's collectible if like nobody wants this shit.
Nobody wants
it. You know what I'm saying?
It's like there's a guy, a comic book collector. I saw some thing on him. He had issue number 1 of some fucking comic book, but it was from the 30s, and it's fucking worth, evidently, it was like appraised hundreds of thousands, if not like millions of dollars, but you can't sell it. There's no buyers. All the fans for it are dead.
Yeah.
So you just keep it. Weird, you know.
Yeah.
Just keep it.
I mean, or maybe low key like try to stir up demand for it.
There's no demand for it, evidently, and the demand is gone because of all the fans are now dead. Too old.
Ben said they got sued in Australia and had to make clear the limited plates were limited to a certain number of production days where they could knock out as many as they wanted.
Yeah.
See, it's like, it's all in the wording.
Yeah.
All in the wording. And that's the thing. It's like, well, limited number. I'm like, well, limited number could mean anything.
They would do the same shit with those fucking...
Any number's limited if you think about it.
Commemorative coins.
Not infinity.
Commemorative coins.
Yeah, I remember those too.
Yeah.
I remember those too. Yeah, Ben is talking about that Ed Anger column. He said, yeah, that was great. And that was the thing that he said. I'm pig biting mad. That's what he always said at the beginning. And he said there was a crazy woman columnist too. Can't remember her name. Well, there was some advice columnists. There was one called Dear Dottie. I kind of remember that one. But I don't know if that was the one you were talking about. Ben said there was a story about David Koresh back when he was Vernon Howell and had a shootout with the previous head of the church. Oh, yeah, shit. And then Ben said, I remember when Bill Clinton was accused of having an affair with one of the aliens who was visiting the White House for secret talks. Yeah, I remember that too. Then Hillary got back at him by having an affair with an alien too. That's what...
Yeah.
That's what happens. Hillary was mad that, like, he got the 3-breasted intern and also banged an alien. She was like, well, I'm also going to bang an alien. See how you like it. Yeah. Hugo said, were there more newspapers like this one?
Not that I can remember. The Sun.
Not really. But the thing about it is, like, there were other tabloids for sure. Yeah, like The Sun, which was kind of like their main competitor. But none of them were quite as trashy as this. None of them were quite... I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it.
This is the Jerry Springer of newspapers.
And this one went crazier, and it really didn't care if the stories were believable or not. I mean, it went straight up paranormal. It just went... You know, there was shit about ghosts and, like I said, the Loch Ness Monster and...
But they're joking about them.
Right. But, well, not really, because they would write everything as though it was real. Like, they very much tried to keep everything, like, straight-faced as though it was a real news story, even though they were clearly just making shit up.
Yeah, well, there's the ghost story right there is that they did an autopsy on a ghost.
Autopsy on a ghost. That's fucking great. I mean, like I said...
I didn't see what the details are. Were they doing an autopsy on a guy and the ghost, and he came back to life and then died again? So is that he was like a ghost?
See, that might be true because, like I said, I mean, the guy that was the editor from 1999 when the new owner took over, whose name was Pecker, by the way, David Pecker, which I remember because, of course, I'm going to remember that. But,
Jenny didn't ever forget the Pecker.
I never forget the Pecker. I never forget a Pecker. But, yeah, that's another T-shirt. I never forget a pecker, Jenny. But yeah, that's the money quote right there. But yeah, so he was saying now, like he said, he's like, I did make some stories up just out of whole cloth. So he's like, so I'm not saying that, but he's like, most of the stuff did have the idea came from somewhere. Like it did have a germ of truth in it in a newspaper story, that whether the original newspaper story was true or not, we don't know. But he's like, we did usually get the ideas from there. So as I was saying before about him writing a headline that was like, you know, alien sexually assaulted by dolphins or whatever it was, he's like, obviously it wasn't an alien and they weren't, but it was about that one, like the story that she had told him about getting almost raped by a porpoise while she was like working on a movie. So he's like, so that was a story that she told me, but I just like made it seem like a lot more. So I kind of feel like maybe that was probably the origin of that. Like maybe somebody did come back to life while they were being autopsied. And so somebody read that and said, ooh, I have an idea. We'll make the headline, you know, we're autopsying a ghost, because you know what I mean? So I kind of feel like that was the mindset that they had. That was the impression that I got, like, from listening to him talk, was that they would try to take everything and, like, kind of twist it to sound as outlandish as possible. But then when you read the story, it didn't sound quite so crazy. Because, you know, they were just trying to get you to read the shit, you know what I mean? So like I said, they had a bunch of kind of, like, recurring stuff. Batboy being their most famous, which, as Oracle mentioned, was actually turned into an off-Broadway musical by, actually, I think it was Tim Robbins' acting group. Like, they did one together. I haven't seen it, but she said it was crazy. That was in the 90s. That was 1997. And so, yeah, so ever since 1992, like, when Batboy first came onto the scene, you know, they put him all through all kinds of adventures. Like, he always had, like, this group of scientists, like, trying to capture him and stuff, and he would always, like, get away from them. And then he went on to, like, fucking, I think he bit Santa Claus at one point, too. Like, so there was that. He, like, endorsed some presidential candidates, and he helped capture Saddam Hussein. There was that. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, they even, like, expanded it out into, like, a comic strip later on, where he was, like, in love with a Bigfoot or a half Bigfoot or something. I can't, like, remember what it was. And I think he was even, like, in a death metal band, too, or some shit like that. So it just went in, like, crazy fucking directions. Like I said, this has to be... The way the guy talked about it, he's like, a lot of the people that worked there, like when he was working there, like had been working there for a really long time. And he didn't seem like, I mean, I guess he wasn't having a good time because it wasn't really his bag. But I don't know. I thought it would sound like kind of like a fun job. Yeah, it would be like a lot of rush and a lot of pressure and everything because, you know, and I've worked for newspapers a lot. So it's like I kind of know how that goes. But I mean, just sitting around in a writing room looking at crazy stories and, like, making crazy shit up, and, like, the crazier the better. I mean, that kind of sounds fun to me. I don't know. I mean, there's worse jobs, for sure. And then another thing that he said, too, is, like, he's like, whenever you wrote a story, no matter what it was about, he's like, you always had to have an expert. And he's like, it didn't matter who the expert was. He's like, hell, I was the expert sometimes. You just needed, like, a really good, he's like, or somebody else in the office. He's like, you just needed somebody to, like, give a good quote. And it's like, they're the expert, blah, blah, blah. And then they would make the name up. You also had a scientist. He's like, if you didn't have an expert, you had to have a scientist. Or, as the Wikipedia page points out, it's like, you either had a scientist or a baffled scientist. There was that, too. So that was... That was like another thing. Science baffled. I don't understand how this. I can't understand how this man found this tiny mermaid in this tuna sandwich. And also, for a time, I didn't remember this because I don't know if they had stopped doing this by the time I bought some. But you know how in I can't remember what British paper it is, but where they had the page 3 girl. I get the Weekly World News had a similar thing, except they called it the page 5 honey. So they always had like, but she wasn't. Because in the UK you can show tits, so in the paper, so they would always have like a topless woman on page 3 of whatever newspaper it was that I can't remember, the Mirror, the Sun, I can't remember, and so they couldn't do that here, but it was just like a girl in a bikini or something like that, like big boobs, but they stopped doing that like in 2006 though. So yeah, so they did you know, again, like a bunch of Elvis is Alive stories. They're like, it wasn't just Elvis either. Like a lot of times they would do other kind of shit that shouldn't be alive, like a dinosaur or another, like a caveman, like one that like Encino Man or something that had been like frozen in a block of ice. I think one time too they said they found Santa Claus in a block of ice, so that was another story that they did. They also wanted to do you know, and it also wasn't just Elvis. Like, they would do, like, you know, JFK is alive, or Marilyn Monroe is alive, or people like that, Michael Jackson, Hitler, people like that. And there was a lot of stories. Like I said, there was ones about the Titanic. They had a run with not just the gay skeletons on the Titanic, but they had ones where they went down to the Titanic and found survivors on there, including babies. So that was another story. Ridiculous. So that was another one that I thought.
So they've been down there for 70 years or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
babies.
And babies.
That was
so I don't know if this that's what I was. Yeah, I was like, does that mean like the survivors were like fucking down there and like having babies like down at the bottom of the ocean? From? They're eating each other, like they're eating their feet, like in Survivor type. That's Stephen King's story. But yeah, so there was all of that, and then like I said, they also had kind of an obsession with, hugely like fat people or fat cats. Because like I said, the world's fattest cat, whose name was Tanya, they did a whole thing with that cat, doing all kind of like adventures. And like I said, I think that cat was, I don't think she was quite as big as they tried to make her seem, maybe, but she was like a hugely fat cat. So that, like, people responded really well to that story, so they kept having this big fat cat like doing other things, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like she would have, like I said, she had 23 old ladies, you know, just an inversion of the whole cat lady thing with lady with 23 cats. So they did that. And then they had, like, that big, huge fat guy who got lowered into the thing. And then, well, the funny thing about the cat was they had all this kind of stuff where the cat had to go on a diet. And, of course, she went on the Catkins diet. You know what I mean? And then she got anorexia. So that was another story where the fat cat got anorexia. And then there was a story where the world's thinnest woman had eaten her. So there was that too.
Eating the cat,
yeah. Okay. So there was that. But yeah, so they kind of had a thing about fat people too. And they said another thing that was real big was, like I said, any kind of like apocalyptic or Armageddon type scenarios, and like especially like upcoming depressions, like economic depressions. Or like people loved those for some reason. So they would always run stories about like, oh, the banks are gonna crash like next week, and you know, everybody's going to go broke, and it's going to be a new, like, Great Depression and all that. So they would always print that kind of stuff, too, because that was really popular. And then there was, like, stuff about, you know, there'd be, like, this whole, like, everybody would be starving, and there'd be, like, a plague and looting and all that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, they, another big thing that they would do too was like any kind of like religious stories, biblical stories, Jesus in the clouds, devil in the clouds, you know, holes to hell. I remember seeing a bunch of those. They'd be like, there was a lot of stories about the Garden of Eden. I remember seeing what like Garden of Eden found. Yeah. At least according to the lore, they said it was in Colorado. So
yeah, makes sense.
Which
the Mormons would say, yeah, of course.
Well, yeah, they're like, well, we would say Utah, but you know, close enough. So they'd have like, you know, God gave it, we found more commandments, like that kind of thing. They found Noah's Ark. That was another
I wonder
thing.
what the commandments were.
Yeah, I don't know.
Finding Noah's Ark. Yeah, that's an old one.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's still... Well, and the thing, I've been wanting to do a show for a while on like...
top of Mount Ararat.
Biblical archaeology. Yeah. Because there's all kind of crazy rabbit holes to go down in that field. Yeah. Let's call it that. But yeah, like search for Noah's Ark, all that kind of shit. It's fascinating, actually.
Even fucking Leonard Nimoy on In Search Of was talking about... Did a whole show on search for Noah's Ark. And then they were always bringing up Mount Ararat.
Yeah.
That there was something up there. He had a photograph that looked like it might be the Ark. There's nothing there, though.
Tammy says, they turned into mermaids, the Titanic survivors.
Yeah.
Then Ben said they used to have helpful tips to spot people who were really aliens in disguise. Yeah, that was another thing that they did. Oh, and they had a thing, too, that I saw about how to spot someone who was a Satanist. So that's nice.
Yeah.
I have a book like that, like written by a evangelical Christian, and I was just like, well, guess I'm a Satanist. So you know what I mean. It was all the regular shit.
Yeah, they wear black hair.
Yeah, they have black hair and black.
They have a pentagram. They listen to heavy metal.
Or
music.
yeah, and
they have a Judas Priest album.
Some of the shit was weird, like even like peace signs and stuff like that were like signs of Satanism. I'm like, since when? Okay.
Well, they're gonna try to put the hippie movement in.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, we don't like hippies.
Hippies,
so
they're
like, fuck the
also.
hippies.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that kind of thing. So, as you might imagine, like after 9/11, there was a bunch of stories about terrorism and that kind of stuff. A lot of stories about Kim Jong-il like taking over the U.S. Saddam Hussein, like them finding a cache of secret weapons, but they were dumb weapons like giant slingshots and dinosaurs. Like he had dinosaurs that he was hiding, so there was that.
Yeah,
so,
Saddam had dinosaurs.
So like I said, it's like they're just taking shit. They're just making it silly. You know what I mean? It's like we totally found fucking dinosaurs in his. And then they had a thing too. Like they had a couple stories about how Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were going to get married. There was that.
Yeah.
That Adolf Hitler had been cloned and was going to join Al-Qaeda. So there was that too. And then Saddam Hussein, who was captured by Bat Boy. And, you know, he led the charge. Yeah. Like, in case you didn't know. I mean, now you know. The truth comes out. Saddam got, he won the lottery, apparently, like, in the U.S., and asked for the government to pay for his sex change operation. So there was that. And I think I mentioned earlier that another thing, they would do a lot of stories about, like, so-and-so historical figure was a woman, like George Washington or Abe Lincoln or whatever. And they also did a long-running thing about how the founding fathers were gay. There was that. Yeah. That was, like, back in the 90s, I think, or 2000s. And, one of my favorite ones, too, was that Dick Cheney was a robot, which I was like, well, that explains a lot. Yeah. But, yeah. And also that George W. Bush was having an affair with Janet Reno. Okay. There was that, too. Which, like I said, I kind of feel like even though they didn't do quote-unquote celebrity stories, but they did talk a lot about political figures. And so I always kind of wondered, because some of the stuff they printed, I mean, obviously, you said, like, oh, you know, Bill Clinton has, like, it's fucking an alien. It's like nobody, like, duh. Like, obviously, that's not real. But it's like, if you were saying stuff about, like, affairs between, like, actual people, I always wondered how they got around that. Because he said that they had a whole Kwanzaa hut of lawyers that'd be like, yeah, you can't print that because they were afraid they get sued. But it's like...
Because they couch it.
I guess.
Some sources say that. Our sources say that.
Yeah, it's like, we're not saying that. Yeah, we're just saying somebody told us that.
We heard that. Right.
We're just repeating that information.
Yeah.
That's how you cover your ass.
That's how they cover. That's how they do.
Well, see, and I feel like
our informants tell us.
That happens a lot. Like, well, you always kind of have to watch because when people give you information about something, they're just like, oh, well, some are saying this. I'm like, some who? Yeah. Who is saying that? Yeah. Like, you know, give me a name. Give me somewhere I can get it from. Because if you're saying some is saying that, I'm like, that could be anybody or that could be nobody. That could be nobody. That could be you saying that. Exactly. You're saying that is what that means.
It's usually nobody. They're making it up.
Yeah, it's like you're just making it up.
Yep.
And it technically, like I said, it's not untrue because they say, well, some are saying that. I'm saying it. I'm saying it right now. So it's like some are saying it. Me.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a lie.
Yeah.
You just gotta like watch.
Some fucking somebody says nobody likes you. That's the same as saying I don't like you. Speaking for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
That's just one of the fucking psychopath fucking ways of doing it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of a way of you just want to get your opinion out there, but you're putting yourself at one remove. It's like, well, I'm not saying this.
We're all saying this.
Other people are saying this. I kind of feel like that's the same kind of thing. You know those kind of motherfuckers that always, like, they'll say something really shitty, and then they'll say something like, oh, well, it's like, well, everyone was thinking it. I was just the only one with balls enough to say it. I'm like, no, one was thinking that. You were thinking that. Yeah. And you just wanted to say it out loud and couch it in terms that made you feel like you weren't, like, a fucking asshole. But I'm not falling for that. I'm just saying. I see that a lot.
What's up, Pookie? Pookie, will you stop fucking with me?
What's Pookie doing?
She's just trying to get attention.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Pookie!
You're on the channel. You're on.
She's on the show. She's like, I'm not looking over there. I'm not looking over there. I'm not looking over there.
She just wants attention.
Yeah. She doesn't like it when we like do the show because she's like, you're not paying attention. Yeah. So So like I said, they did a lot of alien stuff too. They had one repeating alien character whose name was Altair Bob, and he apparently contacted the Weekly World News through quote
Altair
unquote.
Bob is Baltar.
Yeah.
Baltar. That's from fucking Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
That's
He contacted the paper through quote unquote telepathic email.
Yeah, okay.
Which
it's an email that comes through his mind. He doesn't need a computer.
Well, then why would you even need to tag email onto them? Why can't you just say telepathy? Since that's like mind to mind, why do you even need to like say telepathic? That's not even a thing.
No, because it shows
that doesn't
up
make
in your
any
email.
sense.
It shows up in your email.
But he doesn't have to send it.
But he doesn't have to send it. He just sends it with his mind.
But functionally, it doesn't really matter. Like if
Elon Musk is trying to make that happen now.
Because you don't know that he's sent it with his mind. It's just like you got to email like a regular email, and you're like, whoop-de-doo.
He tells you, I'm sending this to you through mental email.
That's what I mean. They could tell you whatever bullshit. Yeah. I didn't even sit down and type this. I just thought it.
Just thought it.
And then I sent it to you, and I'm just like, okay.
It's the world. It's the World News Weekly. What's it called?
Weekly World News. You don't even know.
They, you know, they said we got another mental fucking email, a telepathy email from Baltar. Yeah, they know.
I guess. But yeah, he told them all kind of stuff. He said, you know, there's other aliens, not me, but other aliens who've been like dumping all their garbage on the moon. So you might want to do something about that.
Yeah.
Also bringing people back from the dead. Fighting Bigfoot, because, you know, there's a whole alien Bigfoot crossover thing. When did that happen?
I don't know.
That's another show we need to do, because I'm very curious about how the Bigfoot thing and the extraterrestrial thing got cross-wired. Like, when did that happen?
When dudes were trying to make fucking material for their podcasts and for their fucking little shows, they have to somehow get fucking as many fans as possible together, you know, on one show.
They're trying to integrate.
So they're trying to integrate.
But yeah, so
we got invited to, this is in the early days of this show. We got invited on other shows to be as guests, and we didn't take them. Remember that one? It was like that. The Supernatural Bigfoots.
Yeah. I remember that show.
We never did do that.
I think we did a show like that, but it's like I don't know if anybody listened to it or not. Because after a while, like, look,
what?
I'll sit around and bullshit about aliens or bullshit about Bigfoot all day long. But it's like the second you start telling me that the reason that they haven't found Bigfoot is because, oh, by the way, he's an interdimensional being.
Yeah.
That I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to back away slowly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, no judgment. I'm just saying there's some...
The interdimensional Bigfoot is they came up with that as an explanation as to why they no longer find any footprints.
Right.
They used to find footprints because they had dudes hoaxing them. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the footprint hoaxer is gone. People are seeing Bigfoot, no footprints though to prove it. So it's like, well, it's because he fucking went through a dimensional door.
Yeah.
So he doesn't.
I'd love to know the first fucking person to come up with that. I mean, it was kind of a brilliant idea, and like people took it and ran with it, even though it's clearly the stupidest thing ever.
That
well, I don't know.
Became part of the fucking lore.
Yeah. So now there's
through that though.
There's a whole subset of Bigfoot people that actually do believe that he's like not even an animal.
Well, they say, the Indians say he's more of a spirit. Okay,
Oh, so now they're going the Native American.
Yes, that's what it is. He's an interdimensional being. He's not a Native American spirit. The Native Americans knew about him, but what he really is an alien kind of a thing that comes through a dimensional door.
Every now and then.
Yeah, he forges
just
around
to,
the forest. He lets
walk
you see
through the
him
woods every now and then.
Yeah, walk through the woods
for no reason.
You didn't see me. Then he's gone. You know. It makes no sense. It makes no fucking sense.
It really doesn't. It's like I don't look, why would a Bigfoot do that? Even an interdimensional Bigfoot. You would think that they would have better things to do.
Bigfoot stories go way back.
They do, yeah.
President Teddy Roosevelt basically told a Bigfoot story. That they were around a campfire and they heard some animal-like noises and something big, man-like, was out of sight. They could barely see it, and it threw a rock and it landed near the fire. And they all had the guns at the ready because fucking Teddy was he was a good hunter, ex-soldier and shit. and then the fucking thing ran off, and then he heard like a wild fucking howl, you know. And I don't believe he saw it. Okay, I think it was a tall tale. Men were supposed to tell tales back then, you know, like a campfire tale, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of like
part of the thing.
You had all your buddies over, you had some sherry or some brandy and some cigars around the fire, and it was like, hey, tell us a story, like entertain us. They didn't have TV or nothing.
Yeah, so he didn't say anything about Bigfoot. I'm not sure if Bigfoot was a thing, but it probably was. I think guys like Teddy, who was a hunter and a soldier, probably would have been like on the cutting edge of the, you know, because he was, you know, he's big into nature, camping and shit. He's the kind of guy that would have heard early Bigfoot stories. They probably were Native American. So I think he just told a Bigfoot story, what I'm saying.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. He didn't say Bigfoot. He didn't say anything about footprints. He said it was man-like and big. He could see a silhouette. And it had a wild howl and it threw a rock. But I think he heard a Bigfoot story and repeated it or made his own Bigfoot story.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
Very early 1900s. Yeah.
And like you said, because prior to the advent of television and the internet and things like that, people entertained each other by like sitting around telling stories.
Yeah. And things that were like legends and mysteries, that was like prime shit.
Right.
And,
yeah, everybody loves that shit.
Yeah.
Still.
And Teddy had a fucking killer reputation. So if he told this story, people would be like, "Oh wow, that's some wild shit." You know what I mean? Because he was a woodsman and a hunter and soldier. He was actually a war hero. Really, he actually did some shit against, fought the Spanish, I believe, on one of those islands. So in his day, he was kind of a badass for a politician. He's the kind of guy that would tell a Bigfoot story. Hell yeah.
He does seem like somebody that would do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if he did see something or somebody out there, it's like he would just exaggerate it for a dramatic effect.
Which it might have been a Native American throwing a fucking rock at him.
Yeah, it's like, hey, piss off.
Fuck out of here, white man. I saw it. I don't know what it was. It may have been the skookum. You know,
or the Florida skunk ape.
Yeah.
Although we've already established that Tom is actually the Florida skunk ape.
Yeah. Especially after certain meals.
Yeah, every now and then. Well, we had talked about, like, this was a while back, but we were talking about making, like, a skunk ape video. Because I wanted Tom to be the skunk ape.
Yeah.
Because that's what I call him sometimes.
It was going to be an obvious hoax, though.
Yeah, we were just going to have fun with it. We weren't going to, like, try and fool anybody.
No.
We just thought it would be funny, like, for Tom to be the skunk ape.
Yeah.
We should do it. I don't know if we could do a whole show about the skunk ape.
Yeah.
Because he's just kind of like, I think we did the show about cryptids.
Yeah.
And I think we did the cryptids show. We talked about, like, all the different, because it's basically just, like, a Bigfoot variation. So I feel like after a while, that's, like, really not that interesting. It's like, yeah, it's like a big man-like, ape-like thingy that's, like, wandering around in different environments.
There's no Bigfoot. Not in North America. If anything like that existed, it'd be somewhere in Canada. And I don't think it exists. It's not the right climate. It's not the right. The only thing that's like a Bigfoot that might exist would be like the orang pendek. Where is that from? Indonesia or no? Where was that? I forgot what country it is, but there's something called an orang pendek. And an anthropologist saw it, or a zoologist saw it. He says, "Yeah, I saw it. It was a woman. She saw it. She says it was. She said it was a bipedal ape. It wasn't a fucking hominid, though."
Which, like I said, if in the great course of all of the quote unquote paranormal topics, you know, Bigfoot and aliens are more believable than some of the other shit. Like, I'm still not saying they're super believable, but I'm just saying that on the spectrum of believability, they're closer to the spectrum of believability than unbelievability.
I used to think there could be a Loch Ness monster, but no. If you look at the bottom of Loch Ness, there's no food, not enough food there for something that size. And if there's one of those things, then there's a bunch of them. There's a whole breeding population.
And you would see them.
And if there's a breeding population, they'd be up at the surface hanging out like elephants would.
Like I said, if the Loch Ness Monster, maybe that's another reason why Bigfoot has gone the interdimensional being route. Because if it was just an animal, then why would it hide necessarily? Like, it wouldn't know. Like, the Loch Ness Monster wouldn't have any concept that it was this mysterious creature. Yeah. It would just lay out on the fucking beach.
Yeah, sunning itself.
You know.
The young would be up the surface playing.
Yeah, it wouldn't really feel any need to hide from anybody, especially at that size.
And there'd have to be a viable breeding population, so there wouldn't be inbreeding, which means maybe 20, 30 of them. You just couldn't hide big animals, 20 or 30 big animals like that in Loch Ness. There's not enough food in there. The water's cold. There's not any vegetation really on the bottom. It's just, no. It's deep and it's cold. It's not the right place for something like that. Not enough food there.
Tammy says Sam Elliott killed Bigfoot and Hitler. Good movie. Yeah, that's right. I've been wanting to see that, actually. That yeah, it's called The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then Bigfoot or something like that. Tyler, the guy, says, never seen a picture of Bigfoot that wasn't grainy as shit. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing, and it's just kind of like all of the pictures that you see of, like, UFOs and shit like that, they're all shitty. It's like, look, everybody has an HD camera in their pocket pretty much nowadays. If that shit was around, somebody would get a good picture of it. But the thing about it is that now it's so easy to fake shit that if you did see a really good one, then you would just immediately suspect it was fake. So it's kind of like a no-win situation.
What I think is funny is that right now, they got a guy who's verified, high-level security clearance guy, and I don't remember what agency he's with. He's on the news right now saying that, yeah, we have retrieved alien craft.
I just saw something about that earlier.
Yeah.
Like,
and nobody's giving it any play or any attention. The guy
I saw a headline about it on, I don't remember what. It was just like on my headline,
funny.
my news thing.
Yeah, he said, and he didn't say he saw him, though. Or at least not that I want to hear his whole story. But
yeah, he might just be repeating
might be repeating what he heard.
Which is not.
But nobody's really paying any attention to it. Might have been some kind of distraction.
Aliens, yawn.
Yeah. We got aliens, and nobody gives a fuck about your aliens. It's fucking funny.
I mean, until they like show up in the fucking driveway, I'm kind of like, whatever. You know what I mean? I want to see the shit. So yeah, I talked about.
I'm pretty sure they're coming here. Some of those reports are real. They're not all real though, and. There's no telling what it is. Maybe one day we'll figure it out. I don't think they're going to talk to us. I don't think they're really. I don't think they're fucking interested in us. We're not impressive. There's shit like us everywhere, I guess.
That's what I mean. It's like if I was an alien, why the fuck would I come here?
Yeah,
we're boring.
I think they just come by and check and go, yeah, they're still here.
Look at those little fuckers down there. Let's wipe them out. No.
I don't think they're biological.
We can't wipe them out. Oh.
I don't think they're biological. I think when you see the ship, I think that's them. That's it.
I know, but I like to think of them like little grays, and they're like talking to each other about like just blowing our planet up.
What we know now, it's unlikely that they're biology.
And they have to like stop each other from doing. It's like, I'm gonna push the button. Don't push the button, Carl. God damn it. I just kind of like picture that. I don't know why, but yeah. So, Pilad. Remember I said he was the alien that was having an affair with Hillary Clinton? Apparently he was like real into like female politicians all around, because him and Hillary Clinton broke up, I guess, and then he went after Condoleezza Rice, so you know what I mean. Also Hillary Clinton later adopted an alien baby, so there was that too. So, and like I said, there was a big thing, and I think I had the issue that had the alien endorsing Clinton for president, like in 1992 or whenever it was. I think I had this. So they, every time there was a presidential election, they would always have, it was pretty much like the same picture of the alien, like shaking hands with whoever the favorite presidential candidate was. So they always had that like every single time. Let's see. I'm trying to think of I'm trying to look at some other stuff that they had. So yeah, we were talking about cryptids. You know, they had half animal, half human hybrids. Mer people, that was a big thing. Half alligator, half human. Kangaroo, half woman, half kangaroo. Bigfoot steals race car. There was that too.
Yeah, that's cool.
I mean, like you do. Like I said, a lot of mermaids. You know, there's a lot of mermaid stories like in the early 2000s. Remember I mentioned earlier that the whole jetpack thing like got reported as legitimate? Another one that got reported as legitimate, which again, you know, just isn't as crazy as some of the stuff, was all the stories about Facebook shutting down. Like that, there was a lot of stories in like 2012, I feel like, where it's like, oh my god, Facebook is going to shut down, and ever since like that, and that wasn't true. That actually came from the Weekly World News, but it did get reported as true in various like news sources and stuff like that. So as I mentioned, Weekly World News was their print version went from 1979 till 2007. I think their peak was 90s. Like at their peak, their circulation was like 1.2 million, which is quite a lot for like a weekly newspaper. And like I said, I kind of feel like most people were just buying it for shits and giggles. I don't think people actually believe. Well, I'm sure there was a percentage of people that did actually believe some of the shit, but most people were just like buying it as a gag, like I was. But then after that, you know, in the 2000s, you know, all print media was going downhill. You know, people weren't buying it as much. So in 2007, they decided they were going to wrap it up. So they went online only. And so they still have a website. Like I said, it's behind a paywall. But you can read 3 articles for free, and then they make you subscribe. But last year, or a couple years ago, they actually started doing like a company, it's like Weekly World News, like productions or something like that. So I guess they're going to start going like multimedia. So I don't know if they're going to start making, I think they do have a YouTube channel, I think, but it's like, so they have like little stories on there, and there's like a lot of YouTube channels that have like their old commercials, because they used to run commercials on TV and stuff, which is crazy. But I don't know if they want to like make movies or like, which would be great. I think they should like make some fucking movies about some of those stories, because they would be fucking, that'd be fucking hilarious. But yeah, I especially want to see Second Pope Under Pope Hat. I would watch that movie.
Well, who's that other pope then? Who's the little pope?
That's the. Well, see, that's the.
You got the pope that you know, and you got the little one.
It's the little one, and he's like whispering to him. See, it's like there's a whole scenario. Like I said, you can make.
Which one's the real pope?
See,
is the little one the real pope?
That's the conflict.
He's running the other one.
I'm just saying, some of the headlines that they have, you could make a whole movie out of that because of all the questions that it raises. Like you said, like with the second pope under the pope hat. Who is that? That's like the secret pope. He's the one actually like running the world. He's like the head of the Illuminati or whatever the fuck.
I don't even care about the first pope though.
Well, I know, I don't either. But I'm just saying. I was like, yeah, I didn't think that was funny necessarily because I cared about the pope, but I was just kind of like, it just tickled me to think that he just had this little dude like sitting on his head, like under his hat all the time. I'm like, where does he poop? Is he just like pooping on that dude's head? Or does he have a chamber pot or what? See, like, so many questions that it raises. And like I said, Severed Leg Hops to Hospital, I would watch that movie too. Even though it's kind of not a whole movie, that's really more of a vignette, but okay. But yeah. So, do you have anything else that you would
that's it.
Like to say?
That's it, bro.
Ben said, have you said anything about the crowdfunded website version from about 10 years ago? Oh, yeah, I didn't mention that. Yeah, they did actually do a Kickstarter, and they actually, like, got all the money. So, yeah, they did actually end up doing that, but yeah. Ben said, that's the Black Pope, the head of the Jesuits. The anti-popes are rival Catholics who claim to be the real Pope. Yeah, that's right. But that's another show we should do. That might be interesting, too.
Yeah, I've been hearing about that, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the New World Order conspiracy guys will take it into the damn Catholic realm between the Jesuits and the Catholics, and it's a secret war happening with them. It's like something out of a damn video game. I don't know anything about it, though.
Yeah.
It's just something that just keeps coming up.
I mean, well, see, that's the thing. Look, I know that people, and, you know, they always have, this is just part of the human condition. People love mysteries, and people love, how can I put this? People like for there to be intention and meaning behind things, even when there's not, especially when there's not. So I kind of feel like that's what fuels a lot of conspiracy type stuff. I think it makes people feel better to think that there's like some big shady organization
that's running things
rather than shit just being random. Because if shit's random, then bad shit could happen to you even though you're a good person, and people don't like thinking that. People like to think that there's some kind of cosmic justice or something like that, and there's not. So it's like, so they like to think that there's some kind of intention, even if it's negative intention. I've noticed, even if it's malevolent, they would rather that than everything just being random shit. Like shit just being random really seems to upset people.
Here's my take on it. A lot of people, this is just kind of across the board, see the world is a hierarchy, and that above them is something else, and above them is something else, and above them is something else. And if you go to the top, there's somebody in charge, like Oz was like somebody that there's one person, some shady organization that controls the nations of the earth, and blah blah blah. And then then there's corporations and everything. That's actually not how it is. You got to look at the world more like the jungle. All these organizations are just animals in the jungle. They're all fighting for their own survival. Sometimes they'll pair up with other animals to knock out a third animal that's their enemy. There isn't any clear hierarchy, especially when you start getting into like corporations and NGOs. They're just an animal in a jungle. All right. They have their own powers, but they're usually limited to just one little things that they do. And they don't have the ability to say, like, apply force. They can just, an army of lawyers, maybe they have that, and some money. So they can do a couple things real well, but they can't do everything. Every organization's like that, including corporations. Corporation can seem to like have a lot of power, like Disney can seem to have a lot of power because they can make movies, and they can piss a lot of people off if people don't like the movies. But they're not all powerful. They're fucking going down in flames right now. Mark my words. My sources say Disney's going to sell off a couple theme parks overseas, and they're in talks right now to sell Lucasfilm back to George Lucas because they're going broke. Their liquidity is only like $400 million, and that's nothing compared to their debts and all their overheads. So Disney will be lucky to survive this. And that's starting to come out today. But my sources are good, so yeah, that's happening. And they're going to blame all kinds of shit. Well, Florida did it to him. No. There was they hid a bunch of money that they lost. I guess it's been about 6 years ago. And that's coming to light. Some people got fired over that. Allegedly. Okay. And then Disney did a bunch of shit to itself over the years. It couldn't catch back up. Its theme park is getting its ass kicked by... It's basically getting its ass kicked by Universal.
Although I tell you what, my sister was just at the Disney parks this past weekend, and she said the shit was fucking packed.
Did you? Okay.
And actually, when I was there, last time it was fucking packed.
Yeah. Well, the problem was that they made a bunch of movies, and then they have their own streaming services, Disney Plus, and they lost their asses on that. It was billions and billions of dollars. And then that was the problem. It's not the theme parks. The parks did pretty good. It's all the money that they fucking lost on that damn Disney Plus. They should have never tried to have their own platform and compete against fucking huge fucking studios. It'd been better if they just put that shit out on Netflix. But
speaking of
streaming wars.
Speaking of predictions, I thought I only just remember this because you're making predictions about stuff. But when I was listening to that guy who was the editor of the Weekly World News for a while, I guess this interview was from, when was that whole Will Smith slap thing? When did that happen?
Oh, that's about a year ago, wasn't it?
I don't remember. But whenever that was. So this must have been like right after that because they were talking about it. So they were talking about how all the movies, like, you can't piss off China now because that's like a huge market and blah blah blah. And so one of them said, like, the guy said, oh well, Keanu Reeves said something to piss off China. I don't remember what it was. And so he'll never make a big budget movie again. And I was like,
Well, the thing is
wrong.
Is that what doesn't matter, China doesn't matter anymore, because they really don't watch any American stuff anymore like it was. There's been like a revivalist of Chinese patriotism, and they don't like foreign shit, and they don't like the United States. So it doesn't matter. And Joker came out and fucking kicked ass, and it did. I don't think China even got it. China didn't get Joker. And what was it? It's $1 billion something. One of the most profitable movies of all time.
A few $1 billion.
And and it didn't cost anything to make. Just goes to show you how much money you can make off of just good storytelling and great acting.
I mean,
fucking masterpiece.
You don't need
CGI
and a bunch of, you don't need all that. Like, I know a lot of people like that, like in spectacle and stuff, but it's just like, you don't need that necessarily. Yeah. If you have good storytelling and good characters and shit like that, then you can still make money.
My prediction is that George Lucas is going to buy that back. And you'll still get Mandalorian, and you'll get some of the other stuff that what's his name, Favreau was doing. I think it was his name.
Jon Favreau.
Jon Favreau. I think Jon Favreau is going to be on that team. The word is that Lucas liked The Mandalorian. A lot of the other shit he didn't like. He didn't like those movies either. So I heard that he liked Rogue One. He liked that one.
I also liked Rogue One.
I thought Rogue One was good.
I mean, even though I thought it was...
Solo was mediocre. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of mediocre.
Well, the thing about Rogue One is, like, even though you knew how it was going to end, pretty much, but they still managed to make it, like, suspenseful and compelling and stuff. Yeah. The Han Solo movie was okay, but I kind of feel like it was too much of a, and this is how this happened, and this is how... Yeah. Like, it seemed a little episodic.
Right.
It was an okay movie. It was entertaining, but it just seemed like they were... It was too much fan service and, like, not enough.
Yeah. And Force Awakens came out, and I liked it. I thought they were going to set something up. I thought it was going to go somewhere. The Rian Johnson movie came out, it just blew it for me. And then that third one came out. It had to be, it was a shit show. But a lot of the shit show was trying to save what happened in fucking the last, in what was it? In the Rian Johnson one, I remember what that was. So they tried to repair some of the damage there. It was just, you don't make a trilogy and use different directors on each one of them, and fucking you don't have a story arc planned out. They were making it up as they were going along. It's fucking obvious.
Well,
it was just fucking terrible.
That's, like I said, I didn't mind. I can't believe you're still talking about it after all this time. But it's just kind of like, because I've just I've totally forgotten.
I used to love Star Wars. I used to love it. I liked The Mandalorian, the first 2 seasons. I haven't seen season 3. I've heard mixed things on it, but and I heard because a bunch of shit got cut out because they didn't have the cast that they were supposed to have when they first planned it. Because there was going to be a bunch of stuff, a bunch of Gina Carano stuff in there. It was going to link up with another series that she was going to be in, having to do with the some kind of Star Pilots or some shit. But we'll see. I think if Lucas gets it back, he'll probably save it because they'll retcon a lot of that shit. And I think a lot of fans will come back. And the next step to do after that would be to fix Star Trek. Although I heard that fucking the one with Pike in it's supposed to be pretty good. I think it's called Strange New Worlds, I think is what it's called. It's supposed to be pretty good. But I haven't seen it. I'm not going to get CBS to see it. I don't give a fuck. They need to sell that shit a la carte. I'm not into this platform streaming.
Well, I mean,
bullshit.
That's the thing. I just kind of like... In some ways, you can kind of see most of what you want to see a la carte. Like I said, if you have a couple streaming services, or like, we have Amazon Prime, but you still have to like rent stuff on there, but you can rent almost anything you want to rent on there. But then there's some stuff that's just like Netflix exclusive or is Disney Plus or something like that. And you can't see it, which is kind of a pain in the ass. But the thing about it is that there's so much material, there's so many movies, can't see it all. There's so many series that I want to see, but it's just like I don't have time to watch them all as much as I might want to. So it's like I'm not gonna pay. Look, we already pay for Amazon Prime, we already pay for Netflix, I already pay for Shudder, I pay for Hulu, and I pay for HBO Max, and it's like 98% of everything I want to see is on there. So it's like, and if there's something that's not on there, then I might just like order the fucking Blu-ray off of Amazon or for $10 or something like that. You know what I mean? Just to keep from having to subscribe to another thing. And it's weird because back in the old days, I remember when we first got cable, because we had it pretty early because my dad used to work for the cable company back in the early 80s when it was very new. And we always used to say this, even back in the day when we only had like, 40, 50, 60 channels and we thought that was like a million. Because we're like, holy shit, because we were used to growing up with like 3 or 4 channels. And it's like, look, it's like, why can't we just have, MTV, HBO, whatever, or like a couple other channels? It's like, look, I don't need the fucking PTL Club. I don't need Home Shopping Network. I don't need any of that stuff. I don't watch it. So it's like, why can't I just have like 5 channels I do watch and just pay for that? So now it's more like that, but in a way it's kind of going back to the old where they're kind of like making you do like a package thing.
Yeah.
But in a way that's more spread out, because it's like now it's like, well, you want to see this series? Well, you have to pay for this whole other streaming service. And I know it's not expensive, but they do add up, I don't know.
Ben said that season 3 of Mandalorian's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I really liked The Mandalorian.
I haven't seen season 3. I got season 1 on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
I ordered it. I don't know how that happened. I got it off fucking eBay.
Yeah.
It's a bootleg, but it looks factory.
Yeah,
it's badass. It looks like it came right from Disney.
Yeah, it's
I'd like to get season 2 and 3 like that.
Yeah.
Because I ain't gonna get Disney Plus for that shit.
Well, like I said, the thing about it now is that now you can get a bundle with Hulu. Yeah. Which I already have Hulu, and I think and I already pay I think it's $9 for it. I think for $1 more you can get Disney Plus also, bundled with Hulu. Yeah. So I mean, if you want me to do that, I will, because I already pay for Hulu. So
yeah, and then we could.
I like Hulu because they have all the Gordon Ramsay shows, and they have Handmaid's Tale, and
we can watch season 3 and then cut it off.
Yeah, that's true.
But actually, I'd like to have those on Blu-ray. I like to have hard copies of fucking series, and I didn't see Disney doing that. I didn't see them selling Blu-rays.
That's a whole potential market. Yeah, that's a whole potential market.
Well, they wanted people on that Disney Plus.
Right, I get it. And they were trying to force people into it. But honestly, I think it's better because nowadays people are just used to having options. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? And even the big movie studios have seen that nowadays. It's look, we're going to put the movie out in the theater, but we're also going to put it out on streaming. Yeah. So if you don't want to go to the theater, you can watch it at home, for the same price or whatever. Which, like I said, that's a good compromise because some people...
John Wick 3 and 4, I need those on Blu-ray.
So it's so I don't understand why you would cut off a large source of potential revenue by saying, oh, we're not going to put out hard copies, or we're not going to put this on another streaming service, when it's a lot of people would probably pay for that. You know what I mean? Yeah. A lot of people would probably buy it. Because they're like, well, I don't want to pay for another streaming service, but I do want to see this one show or this one movie, and I would actually pay for that one thing. You know, so you should just have that option available, you would think. I don't know. Ben said season 3 has a subplot with ex-Imperials being paroled into the New Republic and being up to no good. Also, there's a really cool space pirate who looks like Oscar the Grouch. Oh, okay. See, I'm kind of into that. And then Zach said, still can't wait to hear y'all's thoughts on The Last of Us. We only watched the first couple episodes. Yeah. We haven't I haven't got back.
It wasn't compelling to me. I really didn't care what was going to happen next.
Plus, I got distracted by watching Bates Motel because Celtic Angel sent me.
For some reason that was not an addictive series to me. You know, Walking Dead, you see episode 1, you have to see episode 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. It pulls you right in. But this one, Last of Us, I thought was slow and kind of uninteresting.
But that's the thing. You always kind of have to. I mean, series, I'm willing to give them a few episodes because I know some series it takes a while to kind of, get into the groove or whatever. But yeah. All right, so I guess we'll wrap it up because I got shit I gotta do. I gotta go to bed soon. Yeah. Because it's getting to be kind of late. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this rambling discussion about weekly world news and
it was just a fun episode.
Various other things. Yeah, like I said, it was kind of nice to do one that was just kind of silly and not about depressing topics, which is nice. But yeah, so we'll be back Friday night for the Sidetrack show. So hopefully you guys can all make it for that. So thank you everybody for dropping by and hanging out with us this evening. And we'll see you guys again on Friday night. Good.